Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started and hope that some more folks will join us. I'm Courtney from the Whalen Library, and tonight we're excited to have Casey Doyle here to talk to us about planning for the fall garden. And my document just disappeared. There we go. Casey is an environmental and sustainable food system scientist with over 20 years of experience in the garden. She earned her MS at Green Mountain College in sustainable food systems, and specializes in historical gardens such as English and French potager, succession planting, heirloom seeds, and teaching the importance of growing your own food. So thank you to Casey for being here. I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we are recording this session, so you may see it broadcast on Waycam. It'll also be available on the library's YouTube page. I'm recording Casey's video only, so you won't see your face, and please stay muted during her presentation and you won't hear your voice either. Feel free to enter your questions at any time in the chat, but we're going to gather them up and address them at the end of the presentation. And at that point, you're welcome to also unmute to ask your question if you'd rather. So now that I've got that out of the way, I will hand it over to Casey to get started.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I would like to thank Courtney Michael of the Whalen Free Public Library for hosting this event. I'd like to welcome everyone to this Zoom presentation this evening on planning the fall garden. My name is Casey Doyle. I hold a Master of Science in Sustainable Food Systems from Green Mountain College. If you're wondering what a sustainable food system scientist does, it's my job to figure out how to feed the planet by 2050. So I figured I'd start at one garden at a time. The question I get asked most is, how do I start planting for my fall garden? But the question should really be, when should I start planting my fall garden? Knowing what to do when is the thing new gardeners have the hardest time with. Now, this presentation doesn't have a ton of slides, but there is a lot of information. So on the slides that have a lot of writing on it, which I normally don't do, but in this case, it was the best thing to do. But if the slide, like I said, if there's a lot of information on the slide, I'm gonna wait about 30 seconds before moving to the next slide in case anyone is writing notes. Let's begin. So, planning for the fall garden. So, the USDA plant hardiness zone. Wayland, Massachusetts is in zone 6A, which happens to also be the same zone that I'm in. But I figured I would plan this entire presentation for zone 6A. Hardiness zone explained. So in 2012, the USDA released a new and improved version of its plant hardiness zone map. The data used to create this map was collected over a 30-year period between 1976 and 2005. Zone numbers in the continental United States range from 3A in northern Minnesota and 3B in northernmost Maine, to 10A at the southern tip of Texas, 10B around Los Angeles, and 11B in Key West, Florida. The zones in Massachusetts, they range from 5A in the Berkshire Mountains to 7A on Cape Cod. Most of Western Massachusetts is in zone 5B, while most areas in coastal Eastern Massachusetts are now designated as zone 6B, where the average annual extreme minimum winter temperature is between 0 and -5 degrees Fahrenheit. Gardeners who live in 6B should be able to grow plants that are hardy to zone 6, as well as plants whose zones are numbered lower than that, zone 5, 4, 3, and 2. These zone 6 gardeners might be challenged to grow plants that are hardy to zone 7B, average minimum 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, as those plants may not survive in the colder zone 6. Microclimates. A lot of people don't know about microclimates unless you're a master gardener or crop scientist like myself. It is important to remember that within each garden location, microclimates exist which may allow gardeners to grow plants that may be listed at a higher zone number. For example, in a zone 6 garden, there may be a warm, sunny location with well-drained soil, near a building that is protected from the cold and wind, making that particular location in the zone 6 garden an actual zone 7. In that same zone 6 garden, there may be an open, unprotected, low-lying area where cold settles, making that a zone 5 area, an area where zone 6 plants would struggle. Frost states explained. The last and first frost dates are 30% probability, calculated using 1981 to 2010 climate normals. So what are frost dates? A frost date is the average date of the last light freeze in spring or the first light freeze in fall. A light freeze is 29 degrees to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Tender plants will be killed. Moderate freeze is 25 degrees to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's wildly destructive to most vegetation. And severe freeze is 24 degrees Fahrenheit and colder, heavy damage to most garden plants. Note that frost dates are only an estimate based on historical climate data and are not set in stone. The probability of a frost occurring before the fall frost date is 30%, which means that there is still a chance of frost occurring before or after the given dates. And with climate change, anything really can happen. Prediction of frost. Frost is predicted when air temperatures reach 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But because it is colder closer to the ground, cold air sinks, a frost may occur when air temperatures are just above freezing. Always keep an eye on your local weather forecast and plan to protect tender plants accordingly. Weather, topography, and microclimates may also cause considerable variations in the occurrence of frost in your garden. Okay, these are important notes and symbol information for the planting date slide, which is coming. All the crops listed on the next few slides are frost tolerant and taste much better in cooler weather. I made sure that each were comparable to this time. So if planting in a hoop house or a low tunnel, you can plant 3 weeks later than the date listed. I have a slide later on for season extenders, and it discusses hoop houses, low tunnels, and such. The dates listed are for Zone 6A for Wayland, Massachusetts. Planting time may be earlier in eastern and southern Massachusetts and later in western and northern Massachusetts. If planting inside a hoop house, with an additional layer of hoops and a row cover placed over the crop, which essentially it's a hoop house with a house and another house inside of it. You can plant 5 weeks later than the date recommended. I have 2 stars. The date used is the date to plant outdoors. And the 3 stars, Brussels sprouts should mature after frost. DS is direct sown, meaning seed, and TP is transplants. And those seeds should have been started 4 weeks before the planting date. Fall harvest crops, planting dates. So the average frost date for zone 6A is really October 1st to October 10th. I used the last possible date. So without further ado, so the crop beets, which is a direct seed or directly sown, is all the month of August. Broccoli, you should have started the beginning of July inside, and it would be transplanted this week into the beginning of next week. Brussels sprouts, they should have been started in June because they take quite a long time to, excuse me one second. They take a long time to mature. In fact, Brussels sprouts take 80 to 90 days to mature, hence why you have to start it in June. Storage cabbage is a transplant. Again, that's another long one, which is about 70 days. And the fresh eating cabbage transplant, again, should have been started in June because that's 70 to 85 days to mature. The Chinese cabbage can be planted this week, and that's 70 to 90 days to mature. Carrots, it's a direct seed. It can be planted now until next week. A note on the carrots. You want to dig a trench that's only a ½ an inch deep. You want to lay the seeds down and then cover lightly with peat moss, not soil. Soil's too heavy. Do peat moss, water it lightly so that the peat moss is actually wet, and you do have to wait for the peat moss to soak through. And then you cover that row with a board, a wood board. And the wood board stops the evaporation. Not completely, it just inhibits it slightly. So cauliflower is 80 days to mature. So you should have started it in June. Celery is 85 to 120 days to mature. So again, you should have started a long time ago. In fact, May. You should have started it in the beginning of May. And the celeriac is 200 days for maturing. So again, that should have been started in the beginning of May. So now that you know these dates, at least now you're able to prepare for next fall. Collards, it's a transplant. And that is 60 to 75 days. It's not bad, but still the planting was past due now. The chicory, the endive is what I was doing it for. You have August 11th, plant that as a transplant. You may be able to pull it off if you have grow lights to get it started inside just for a little bit. especially with a seed mat. The chicory and the radicchio, that should have been done last month because that's 85 to 100 days. The fennel's 90 days. Yeah, so unfortunately that's last month. Asian greens, full size. You can do that this week. And it's a direct seed. Kale, it's direct seed. Again, it's last month, but at least you know for next year. Kohlrabi, direct seed. Get that in. And that's actually not bad, 50 to 70 days. Lakes, that's 120 to 150 days to maturity. And it's a transplant, and that should have been done in June. Baby lettuce, it's a direct seed. It can be done on August 13th. And that's 30 to 40 days. That's simple, and you can just continue. Personally, I would start planting them now up until the 13th. So then you have succession planting, and you'll have a little bit more of an abundance. So lettuce heads is also a direct seed, and unfortunately, you can really only do that once. But the lettuce heads is 45 to 55 days to maturity. Onions is a direct seed, but that was last month. And that's 100 to 175 days to maturity. Planting dates continued. Parsnips. Everyone thinks that they can grow parsnips. Yeah, you can grow them, but they take a long time. Like 130 days to maturity. Yeah, you really need to start those early, but they do so much better in the colder weather. So much sweeter. Peas, the frost sensitive type, 60 to 70 days. You want to start ASAP and start doing succession planting with your peas from now until like the 10th. You can get a lot in at that time. The round radish, it's a direct seed. Same thing. I mean, you have an entire month almost to do succession planting with round radishes and the daikon radish. And the daikon radish, I have a picture up the top right. It's the long white radish, and they're actually very good. They don't have too much of a bite. Another good radish is the red meat, and those are round, reddish, and when you cut into them, they have a variegated color of red and white. It's very pretty, and it doesn't have a peppery taste. The rutabaga, it's a direct seed, and you have a month. Actually, no, the rutabaga, sorry, was July 12th. Yeah, you don't. It's the spinach. The spinach is the direct seed, and you have an entire month. And that with the Swiss chard, that's also a direct seed. The turnips, which is salad, direct seed. And the turnips purple top. You can do succession planting with all of those and just get as much as you want into your garden, and you'll have a good supply of all of those. But the radishes, like I said, are, the round one is 22 to 70 days. The daikon is 60 to 70 days. The rutabaga is 80 to 100 days. So you have to understand why you're doing it in July. The spinach, 37 to 45 days. The Swiss chard, 60 to 65 days. The salad turnips are 40 to 50 days. And the purple top turnip is 40 to 50 days. So season extenders. I tell people a lot about season extenders. So a cloche, also known as a hot cap, is the glass cloche, is that dome glass to the left. You know, a glass, you know, is covering for protecting plants in cold temperatures. The original form of a cloche is a bell-shaped glass like that one that is placed over an individual plant. And then you have the plastic cloche right below the glass, and those are good as well. They're less expensive than the glass. Not as pretty though, but that's just me. Row cover, which is right here. Row covers are made of either plastic, spun-bounded, or woven synthetic materials. They enhance growth by raising daytime air temperature around plants up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. They offer some wind and frost protection and provide a barrier against pests. It is essential to secure all edges when installing, but necessary to remove for pollination. Spun or woven fabric is support with hoops or lay loosely over plants and allowed to float, allows water through. If stored properly, it may last 2 to 3 years. Row covers, you know, are sheets in synthetic breathable fabric of various weights and mesh diameters. And like I said, the floating row covers are unsupported. So the top picture with the UNH cooperative extension, that one is more structured. And the one below it for Growing a Greener World, it's not really supposed to have. I believe it has some structure to it, but normally they just lay it over directly on the plant leaves and the crop grows. So high tunnel, which is this one right here. I know most backyard growers won't have a high tunnel. You can get a smaller version of a high tunnel. It's still the same. But high tunnels are simple greenhouse-like structures over bare ground without the elaborate heating and cooling systems of a greenhouse. They rely primarily on passive solar heating and passive ventilation, meaning you can open the front and the back and the sides. They generally have steel pipe frames set into the ground and are covered with 1 or 2 layers of greenhouse grade plastic sometimes, and other times they have a type of fabric. They are irrigated using drip systems, hand watering, or small sprinklers. Also, in a high tunnel, carefully monitor soil fertility status, including soluble salts, and conduct plant tissue analysis when making fertility decisions. Soil test annually in high tunnels as pH can rise quickly with the absence of rain. So rain, all this rain that we get is good for some things. Okay, so now we have cold frames. I would rather deal with cold frames than anything else. I've made many of them. So a cold frame is simply a bottomless box with a glass or plastic top that lets in sunlight and can be built from a variety of materials. It is generally used to harden seedlings off and protect direct seeded crops from cold temperatures. A cold frame offers a greater degree of frost protection than floating row covers, but if not monitored carefully, can overheat. With that being said, you can buy little arms that have wax in the tube, and when the wax heats up, the arm picks up the window, and now you have a space for airflow. Now, when it gets colder towards the evening, the wax will harden and the arm will close. So you don't have to really worry about opening and closing because the arm will do it for you. So when using a cold frame, be mindful of the following. Select a site with well-drained soil. Orient south to southeast, and monitor temperature inside frame and adjust opening to ventilation. So a caterpillar tunnel. Seen there below the high tunnel by Cornell University. Caterpillar tunnels are seasonal structures covered with the same materials as row covers, but with rigid supports, such as metal or plastic tubing or electrical conduit. In the past, I have used an inch PVC pipe that's 10 feet long. They bend very easily, and you just secure, you can secure with iron stakes that they slide over, or you can just put them inside the bed, and the pressure against the wood works fine. Caterpillar tunnels are 3-season structures and are typically 6 to 8 feet high and 10 to 20 feet wide. So you can walk through them. It's very nice. They are usually held in place with ropes anchored to the ground. Ventilation must be managed manually. That's the only hard thing about these. If you have several of these, you're constantly opening and closing. The cold frame, I didn't mention yet, at the bottom right by Grow Journey, you don't even have to use wood in old windows or so and such, or plastic. You can just use straw bales and use old windows. So you're repurposing. Recycle and reuse, repurpose. But with those, you have to remove the windows to have it ventilate, because you can't connect an arm to the straw bales. It's not strong enough. Now, the thermal mass. So at the top right, you'll see a black 55-gallon drum. These are essentially very large solar pillows, and I have that listed on the top left. These thermal mass drums are normally put inside high tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, or anything that you can walk through. And for instance, in the high tunnel, you can have 20 on each side of the high tunnel, right near the sides where they open, and you have them all filled with water. And during the day, when you have your sides rolled up on the high tunnel, the sun will hit the black, and the black and the water will absorb the heat. And then at night, when you close all the flaps down, they emit heat. So that is your way of heating your plants at night. The solar pillow does the same thing. It's basically just a rock. It's a rock that you have painted black, and you use it in your cold frames. So you take your rocks out during the day in the sunlight. They get really nice and hot, and then before the sun sets, you bring them, as the windows are closing on your cold frame, you, especially the hard ones, you can put your rocks inside around the plants, not directly on top of them, but close enough. And then during the night, they emit their heat. They work very well. You can get very decorative and creative with them, but you need them to be black. Soil management. So the goal of a soil management program should be to have nutrients in the high range and organic matter between 5 and 8%. If nutrients fall far below this range, growth and or quality may be impeded. So let's begin the bullets. Soil lacking or poor drainage. So if you had problems with your garden where you felt it didn't do as well, or last year, or you had pooling water, then you'll either want to send a sample into UMass Extension for a soil test, or get an NPK test and do it yourself. And then the soil. Before planting for fall, I highly suggest you amend your soil for the remaining growing season. I'll get on to that more within the slide. So what is soil? It's about 25% air, 25% water. 50% is made up of 3 components: tiny rock particles, organic matter, and living organisms. Rock particles are the primary component of soil, making up 90% or more of the solid components, or 45% of the total volume. A simplified explanation of soil. Tiny rocks come from big rocks, which are made from minerals. Some in a pure form, but usually in a mixture of limestone, basalt, or granite. So root wedging, expansion and contraction from temperature changes, wind erosion, and chemical weathering from rain, which makes this mildly acidic, that dissolves rock. Rock-loving lichens, also acidic, all continuously break off tiny bits of rock year after year. So the best texture for plant growth is 25 to 50% silt and 10 to 25% clay. Soil test. You probably don't want to do it, but you really should do it. You grab a sample when you're putting your garden to bed. After your fall harvest, everyone should put your garden to bed. Don't leave it for next year, because that will just cause a plethora of issues. So grab a sample when you're putting your garden to bed and send it off to UMass. You're going to send it to the UMass Soil and Nutrient Testing Laboratory. If you have 30 or more samples, you email soiltest@umass.edu, or you call the phone number 413-545-2311 to arrange a contactless drop-off outside the building. All other orders must be mailed through USPS, UPS, FedEx, or other private carriers. Soil samples should be representative of the garden area. So 10 to 12 or more if you like. Subsamples should be randomly taken throughout the garden. These should consist of slices of soil from the top down to the depth of 7 or 8 inches. The subsamples should be mixed together into a composite from which you take a final sample of about a cup. Organic fertilizers for the garden. NPK. A lot of you know what that means, but it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are the most commonly applied nutrients. Approved organic sources of nitrogen include compost, manure, legume cover crops, blood meal, Chilean nitrate, which is sodium nitrate, and alfalfa meals. Manure can be an excellent source of nitrogen and other nutrients, but may contain human pathogens as E. coli bacteria. For safety, manure should be applied at least 120 days before harvesting food crops. To accomplish this, manure should be applied in the fall, but a winter cover crop should be planted to prevent the nitrogen from leaching away over the winter. Manure should also be promptly turned into the soil to prevent volatilization, loss of nitrogen. Volatilization is the conversion of a liquid chemical into a vapor which escapes into the atmosphere. Compost is an excellent soil amendment, but it releases nitrogen more slowly than other sources. The best option for the fall garden. Really, you've already heavily composted for your summer garden. And yes, a lot has been taken from it. And your best bet right now is just to use a standard 10-10-10. You know, organic fertilizer, just sufficient to grow for fall. And I also suggest 2 handfuls of vermicompost per bed. I use a very reputable company based in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, called Buxton Hollow Farms. They have an excellent vermicompost. If you would like that information, you can email me. So vermicompost contains water-soluble nutrients and is excellent, nutrient-rich organic fertilizer and soil conditioner. You know, it is used in farming and small-scale sustainable organic farming. Vermicompost is basically just worm manure, but it's great. Pests of the fall garden. We all know these pests. We've been dealing with them all summer. So we have aphids, cabbage worm. These are the heavy hitters. These are the ones that are wreaking havoc because they are all at their adult stage. They're all rip-roaring and ready to go. And they're actually waiting to lay their eggs and then go off and die. But unfortunately, they still have our fall garden to go through. So like I said, aphids, cabbage worm, slug, the cabbage looper, and the flea beetle. So aphids. There are 3 aphid species that impact fall brassicas plantings, including the cabbage aphid, the turnip aphid, and the green peach aphid. As they sap your plants of nutrients, the plants will develop abnormalities, including curling and dried leaves and slowed growth. Aphids in organic systems can be managed using OMRI, approved neem oil sprays and insecticidal soaps. These will need to be used weekly until the infestation is under control. The best management of aphids is to check for populations early and often. Look at the undersides of lower leaves and stems and examine plants for damaged fecal matter, adults, and eggs. Leaf matter that is damaged and holding a cluster of aphids should be removed if possible. Aphids thrive in conditions where there is ample cover and protection from the elements. Nitrogen foliar sprays and in densely planed material, making fall a prime time for their populations to explode. Slugs or snails. It is during the fall months that snails and slugs will be laying over half of their total eggs for the season, and each egg will hatch in 2 to 3 weeks. The adolescent individuals overwinter in the garden and will cause damage to fall plants. Snail and slug pressure can cause serious damage in a greenhouse or high tunnel setting and will appear as large holes in plant leaves. Under closer examination, you may notice slime trails, showing you exactly where they went as they devastated your crops. There are many homemade treatments for slugs, including spreading coffee grounds and crushed eggshells around plants, ear traps, and putting copper tape around the base of plants. Other methods for larger infestations include diatomaceous earth, organic slug pellets, beneficial nematodes, and being a slug ninja, hand picking in the dark with a headlamp. It's highly effective. A cabbage looper are extremely common pests, can cause damage all season in cooler climates and have a serious resurgence in the fall. You will notice an infestation is on the horizon if you spot the grayish brown moth on the right-hand side of the picture. Brown moth in the evening that the looper transforms into at the end of its life cycle, commonly referred to as the owlet moth. The moth lays its tiny eggs on the brassica crops and the caterpillars hatch, beginning to feed immediately. At first, the larvae are clear with dark heads, making them difficult to see. As they age, they will develop a pale green color with stripes that round down to the sides of their body. When the infestation begins, the larvae will feed on the undersides of leaves along leaf veins, making the damage difficult to detect. As they mature, they will move to the growth center of the plant, defoliating kale and collards by eating the newly emerging leaves at the veins. They are heavy feeders when they're in their caterpillar stage and can cause damage very quickly. Populations can be controlled by using floating row cover on seedlings and transplants to prevent the eggs from being laid on the plants and through hand picking. They can be sprayed with OMRI-approved forms of BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. The imported cabbage worm, in the bottom left under the aphids. This caterpillar results in a yellow-white butterfly that you will see dancing among your brassica plants all season long. I say kill that butterfly. They will lay their eggs primarily in the light of day. The butterfly lays one yellow oblong egg at a time. So that's what you're looking for. Look for yellow oblong egg. When the larvae hatch, they exhibit an orange stripe down their back and two yellow stripes along the sides of their body. They eventually mature into a pale green, maintaining these lines as fine dots along their bodies. Damage caused by these caterpillars can be extensive, as they will eat any part of the leaf and will quickly defoliate plants as they develop towards their pupal stage. Populations can be controlled by using floating row cover to prevent egg laying through hand picking. You can also use OMRI-approved BT, which is the Bacillus thuringiensis. The flea beetle under the cabbage looper. There are several types of flea beetles, and each has a favorite crop family. In the fall, the flea beetle type that cause damage to brassicas and related crop types include the crucifer flea beetle and the striped flea beetle. Adult flea beetles overwinter in the soils, which can make them very difficult to eradicate once a population has settled in. Flea beetles attack the plants both above ground and on the leaves and below ground, where the larvae begin life by feeding on the roots. Adults lay eggs at the base of the host plant, and once the larvae hatch, they will feed on the roots of the crop for up to 4 weeks. Flea beetles thrive in conditions where garden debris and weeds are left unmaintained. So I suggest you remove this garden debris. I don't normally recommend tilling, but in areas where populations have gotten out of control, you can kill overwintered adults by doing this method. Using floating row cover to protect crops can be helpful, so long as there isn't a population laying dormant in the soil. In the case of flea beetles, crop rotation can be key. Intentional mulching can help deter these pests along with beneficial nematode drenches. Other OMRI-approved methods for deterring infestations include neem oils and diatomaceous earth. I have 2 here that are not listed on this slide. I was asked these questions before the presentation, and it's regarding the brown marmorated stink bug and what to do about them. I say you pick them off and you use insecticidal soap. That's it. You pick them off, you squish them, you throw them out, whatever. Do not put them in your compost pile. Just throw them away in the trash or pulverize them into the ground. And the other one is cucumber beetles and squash bugs, which we all deal with all summer long. So place a floating row cover over young squash plants until they start to bloom. This will exclude attacking insects until plants are strong enough to withstand pest damage. Damage control. Yeah, this is the big one. This is the big hitter. Aphids, there's 3 types, as I discussed. The plants develop abnormalities, and your best bet is neem oil. And the slugs and snails, just really, really look for the large holes in plant leaves and the homemade treatments, diatomaceous earths, the slug pelts, the nematodes, the slug ninja. I know I've already explained these, but I wrote them out in another slide so that if people wanted to take notes, if they need to deal with these. So I will wait a few 30 seconds for people to possibly write these down. Okay. Since I know this was mentioned in the description, I figured I would put a little tidbit in discussing American, English, and French potager gardens. An American garden tends to be 1 to 2 seasons, meaning spring and summer. Not too many people do a fall garden. They just think, oh, here comes September, they're just gonna rip out the tomatoes and cucumbers, and that's it. My tomatoes and cucumbers normally grow into October because we have Indian summer in New England. So if you can keep them that long, that's great. American gardens are seen more like a status symbol more than anything. But lately, especially with the pandemic, I think gardeners have really exploded, and they have realized that we need to grow our own food because our food system needs some serious help, and food is very important for our survival. An English garden, it's 3 seasons. It started in the 18th century. It's idolized view of nature, and it usually includes a lake, recreation, classic temples, gently sweeping lawns, groves of trees, bridges, and picturesque architecture. If you're thinking of a PBS show taking place in the 1800s with someone's backyard, you are thinking correct. That is an English garden. And the French potager is a kitchen garden. It's 4 seasons. You're probably thinking, we can't grow a French potager here, but you are incorrect. We can. In fact, Eliot Coleman in northern Maine, he grows French potager gardens. You should check out, he has many books and they're very informative. But as I mentioned earlier, regarding hoop houses, a house within a house within a house, this is how you can do 4 seasons in New England. If you have a hoop house or high tunnel and you have something growing and you put a smaller, such as a caterpillar tunnel inside your hoop house, and then underneath you put another row cover within that caterpillar tunnel, and now you're able to grow for 4 seasons. Meaning you can grow in winter. You can grow in winter what you would normally grow in summer. That's the difference in zones and how much these row covers actually contain heat. So French potager gardens are intermingled with fruits and vegetables, herbs and flowers, and the first gardens like this were in medieval times in the 13th century. If you think of King Louis XIV, he had French potager gardens. If you think about these big, massive gardens in castles of Europe that have squares with corners, that's considered a French potager garden. Especially if it's behind the castle and not in the front where all the elaborate ornate stuff is. But yes, these are the gardens. Right? English and French potager is what I have an expertise in. And they're fun. And they're different. So before I say thank you, my closing statement, the fun of growing your own fruit and vegetables is that you're always learning and always conducting experiments. When I'm told you can't grow that here, I always ask, why not? Try new things, even if everyone else says you can't. I strongly recommend a garden journal because one year is never the same as the next. Make note of the date, the weather, sun, clouds, hot, cold, humidity level, and definitely get a rain gauge. Become a citizen scientist with COCORA, which means Community Coalition Rain, Hail, and Snow. Because the climate change and global warming, these notes will become invaluable to your gardening. With all the rain we had this year, I'm sure some of you will scoff at this next statement, but in all honesty, we need to conserve every drop of water we receive. I also recommend on getting or making a rain barrel, which I have a presentation on how to make a rain barrel. And, because we all live in New England and we all know the weather here changes quickly. So thank you for listening to me. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Casey, so much.
You're welcome.
That was great. I know that Jano entered some questions in the chat, so maybe we can start with those.
Okay.
The first was about the soil test drop-off. She's recalling that it's in Amherst. Does that sound familiar?
The one that I got was actually from the UMass Extension Soil Testing Laboratory. That's the one that they state to go to.
Okay.
But they're not taking drop-offs. You can't drop it off. You have to mail it.
Okay, that's good.
Because of the pandemic, they're not taking they're not allowing anyone to drop off.
I see. So I'm not sure if she heard your first part. She's asking, can planting sometimes be earlier even in microclimates like a south-facing dooryard?
You would have to take, I personally would pull out my light meter and even maybe a thermometer, and just for a couple of days, and take the light requirements in that section and the temperature, and then maybe, yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to try. I mean.
Yeah. And a question about companion plantings in the fall garden. Are there combinations of plants that will confer enhanced pest protection or yields?
No, because a lot of these are, brassicas and I mean, a lot of them, like I discussed the pests for a reason, because this is the height of when they're at their worst, unfortunately. And that's when I would really just use the row covers.
Okay. Let's see. Jeannot is also offering to anyone in Wayland or the area. She has a lot of manure. She also has diatomaceous earth and is happy to offer quantities for a small contribution or plant swap. And Anna is asking, do you have a presentation about spring gardens?
It's on the list of to-do. Right now, I'm just doing all the stuff that would be happening for fall. I will be doing one on how to put your garden to bed, what you need to do to all your tools, everything.
I see.
And then it'll, start going with helping pollinators, why we need to be bird watching, so on and so forth. It's more environmental. And then I'll probably in February, I'm probably going to be doing January, February is going to be, birds and pollination and seed starting. Like if I have a small greenhouse inside my office.
Oh, wow.
I'm in a condo, so I can do this. If I can do this and I grow for a community garden that I designed last year, and I grow everything for them.
Wow. So cool.
So if I can do that, anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it. Anyone else have any questions?
So why does this who's it, Janet?
Oh, Jeannot, she has horses.
Jeannot, why do you have so much diatomaceous earth?
Let's see.
Hi, I'm unmuted. Because you can use it for a lot of things. It's cheaper to buy it in bulk, and you can I haven't actually needed to use it, but I try not to use chemical wormers, with my animals if I don't need to. I just do fecal tests every few years, and I thought diatomaceous earth would be a substitute for ivermectin and that sort of thing. But I actually, based on the fecals, I haven't even needed to. Which means that my manure is also pretty clean if people are concerned about that.
This is horse manure?
Yes.
Okay.
With wood shavings.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That would be good to know. Maybe I might contact you next.
I have some for my houseplants.
What was that?
Oh, I have diatomaceous earth for my houseplants.
Yeah. Yeah. I use it at the community garden for all the ants.
Yeah.
It works great.
Yeah. All right.
So how was it, everyone?
What did everyone think of her presentation?
Okay. Very informative. Very enjoyable, if that's all right to say.
I'm glad. I don't want to bore anyone to death, and I know this can get a little hefty. I mean, just wait. I have a composting 101 in a couple of weeks, so that's going to be interesting. That's all science.
Cool.
Now, I use my iPad to take pictures of your slides, and that I find is effective. And I don't have to try to remember everything that you said. It was very good, and you paced yourself well, if you want to know that.
Yeah, I figured I told myself, and I even said in the beginning that if there was a lot of stuff on the slides, that I was going to try to wait 30 seconds. So apparently that works.
Good.
Yeah, that was a good idea because you did not overwhelm us with little details. So it was very good. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I hope you will make more presentations about what you said, the subjects that you mentioned, because it was very useful. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Great.
Janelle, the Victory Garden, I agree.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you so much, Casey, and we hope to have you back again soon.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.